folks. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to be starting off with the first IoT session, IoT being the Internet of Things, just so we can make it very clear. On this first session, I'm very happy to have with me a fantastic panel. We're going to be talking to you about beyond connectivity. And I will start, we have Jimmy, who's right next to me from Zariot. He's head of security there. We have Nick Earle, who is the CEO of Eseye, and also Andrew Parkin, who's founder of TecFutures. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, gentlemen. Let me start with you, Jimmy, and we just go.
Thanks, Nassia. My name is Jimmy Jones. I work as the head of security for Zariot, as Nassia said. Zariot are a IoT cellular connectivity company with a particular focus on security. And we're looking to try and lock down the systems to be secure, but also open them up for innovation. So we're looking to try and drive access to the SIMs, access to our networks, in a secure way that allows end-to-end IoT design. So that's basically where we're looking to do. We're looking to close that gap between the device and the cloud. We're trying to make that more accessible.
Thank you, Jimmy. Nick, over to you, sir.
Hi, everyone. Nick Earle, I'm the CEO of Eseye. Eseye is an MVNO. We have about just under 4 million connections. We're second largest in the UK. Wireless Logic is the large one. We're actually a different type of MVNO in that we very much believe that it's all about the device. I actually just did some filming with Kaleido, the analyst company, and they did a survey that we all know IoT is difficult. And the survey was almost 1,000 companies. And they said, when you look back at your last IoT project, what was the biggest problem you had? And actually it was the device. 84% said the device.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's 84%. Oh, really? Okay. So Kaleido did a research report of just under 1,000 customers who had tried to do IoT. And they said, in retrospect, what was the most difficult part of IoT? And the difficult part was the device. So we do the device and the connectivity. So we help our founders, some of the company created Zigbee. We're device guys. We optimize the device. We do the connectivity. And our focus is on large global. We do all of Amazon. We do Shell, Walmart, Philips, Sony. We do global connectivity. Yeah. So that's Eseye.
Thank you so much, Nick. And Andrew, some of you don't need me to introduce you to Andrew. Andrew has been a face on the IoT world and at MEF for quite a few years. He recently started his own company, TecFutures, but I am speaking for you now, Andrew, so I'm going to just hand it over.
That's a really good introduction, Nassia. Yeah, I had Nassia's job for 3 years at MEF, where I was the IoT program director, and quite a few of the faces have changed in the past 12 months, but that's kind of the nature of the beast. By background, I'm an analyst and consultant, and late last year, my business colleague Phil Todd, who's here today, and I set up TecFutures. And TecFutures, we're trying to position as not just another analyst consulting company, but we're bringing together what we see as a supply and demand side of the market. So we're looking at what enterprises really want from their disruptive technologies, of which IoT is one that we're exploring currently, and all the adjacent technologies associated with IoT. And we're looking at the supply side of the market, what suppliers are doing. And what we're tending to find is that what the suppliers think businesses want and what businesses actually want, sometimes they're very similar, but sometimes they're quite at odds. So I'm hoping that throughout the course of the discussion today to bring out some of those similarities and differences, and also, as Nick said, pointing to the recent survey that they undertook. We've also undertaken a couple of surveys, and there's some interesting bits and pieces coming out of there in terms of growth, barriers, opportunities and trends that I think we'll explore today.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue into the first question for you folks. And I mean, everybody's talking about IoT. Very few people understand IoT, and I like to say that IoT is misunderstood in many different ways because it's not one thing, and that by definition, it varies from whom you're talking to. So, Nick, I'm going to come to you first, and where do you see the IoT industry? What are the major trends that we will see this year? Because I know you at Eseye are looking at the trends in the beginning of each year and where the whole industry is going.
Nice simple question to start off with. Yeah, actually the number one downloaded piece of collateral from our website is our annual predictions report, which I think is what you were referring to. And so in the 2023 report, we are, one of the things that we're seeing is the emergence of multi-RAT. Because we tend to think of connectivity and we always say, therefore cellular. But actually, if you look at what the emerging opportunities like in the home market, if you look at what Apple and Google and others are doing around adoption of Thread and Matter, the Matter standard for consumer devices, which was dominant at CES. If you look at the GSMA Release 17, for the low Earth orbiting satellite over a cellular modem. The emergence of private networks and the opportunities for public-private switching. What we actually see is one of the big things that's happening is people wanting multi-RAT agnostic connectivity. And we've come from a proprietary silos with 820 MNOs, or with a proprietary lock, the SIM, into an MVNO model, which is agnostic and abstracted to enable interoperability between competing proprietary silos. And what we're now seeing is the need for not just interoperability between operators, but interoperability between all types of connectivity types in the device. And therefore the device has to have the intelligence to sense network capabilities and things like latency and signal strength and others, and actually make decisions at the device rather than the platform, which are agnostic to the underlying model. So one of the big predictions is things like home energy management, solar panels, remote patient monitoring, medical grade devices, rather than asking an 83-year-old to configure a device to their iPhone, which isn't going to happen. So we see the emergence of some new big opportunities, and the consumer and the business world coming together. That's one of the main themes of the report.
Okay. So, Jimmy, you have been taking a view that is very much embedded with security and IoT, and not only when we're coming to connectivity. So what are the key trends that you've been seeing around regulations and security and connectivity for that matter?
Yeah, I think Nick's covered a lot there, but I think when it comes to security, you need to understand the whole solution. So there's the device, there's the network, and there's the application. So we call that the solution's DNA. If you don't understand the DNA, then you can't protect it. What we've looked to do, which is similar to Nick again, is we understand that the device is actually the key here. That has to be secure, and we have to work with them. If you imagine the network is sitting in the middle with the only element in that DNA is touching both sides. So if we can bleed out our security and allow those guys to actually come and work with us more, then we, by definition, make it more secure because you've got a more consolidated solution. And that's not just security as well. It should be actual ease of use as well. If the guy in the application can't work with the guy on the device because something on the device doesn't quite talking exactly the same way. Well, interoperability is the whole point of cellular. So that's been really key. We're looking to try and remove those frictions and move forward. And we've done that by working with partners. We have an end-to-end encryption partner called the Atsign. It's been very successful, touch wood. We just announced a collaboration with a blockchain company where we put their tokens onto the system, which improves attestation, so that's been very good. But all of that really comes into focus even more when we start to see the regulation. So the Radio Equipment Directive in the EU, the UK's security, IT security comes into force in December this year. What we're seeing is people are now taking notice of that, and actually where we used to see the problems with IoT solutions being security would always be at 95%. 95% of our people are worried about security, and then you go and look at how much budget they spend on it, and it was 5%. Where did the other 90% go? But we're starting to see that being pushed. We think that is a compelling event because there's going to be, at the end of this year in the UK and in the middle of next year for the EU, there's going to be an absolute avalanche of testing for the people who want to get the certification stamp on their devices. So we think that's really pushing things, and that's been a huge play in the last few months.
That's very good. I don't know, Andrew, if you have anything in terms of insights for 2023.
Yeah, I'm going to take a much less technical view of what's going on. I think, in terms of trends and developments, what's happening now, I think, as an external analyst, what I'm seeing is that we're reaching a point of inflection with IoT, where it's going way beyond the more pioneering organisations, particularly on the enterprise side, and moving into the mainstream. And the mainstream, to reiterate Nick's points, they're looking for simplicity, and if that's the consumer, if we want to see these massive IoT, it's got to be easily configurable. If we're looking at the enterprise, what we're seeing in terms of drivers are that they want sector-based solutions that they can introduce. And we've sort of seen historically that we get organisations like BMW who are happy to take the raw components of a solution and build it into what they need. But as you get into a more mainstream market, they're needing different sort of things. Also, from the sort of work we've been doing on surveys, we're sort of seeing that growth rates are stabilising, and we did a CSP survey quite recently and seeing that they're estimating growth around 7 to 8%, depending on where they sit in the marketplace. The larger players are predicting more growth. And I think, sort of as an observer to the IoT market, we've seen so many players come in a bit like a gold rush, and I'm sort of anticipating there's going to be a little bit of a stakeout. I know today's session is talking beyond connectivity.
Yes.
But I want to harp on about connectivity and pick up 2 points there. The first is that the share of connectivity as part of the overall revenue. So for every dollar spent on IoT, how much do you spend on connectivity? And when I looked a couple of years ago, that figure was probably 12%, 10-12%. It's dropping now to 7-8%. So somebody's getting a bigger slug of something else, and it may be around these wraparounds, of which security is one of the most important attributes that enterprises point to. The second, again, sort of emphasising a point that Nick made, is there is a real mix of technologies in demand. And I think I heard at a session yesterday that mobile network operators want to own the entire value chain, and that's just not practical with IoT at the moment. They have expertise in particular areas, and from what we see talking to organisations, they're asking for a mix of cellular and non-cellular technologies. And in fact, the top three were LoRaWAN, Wi-Fi, followed by 5G, and some of those, depending on the geographical focus, were much higher. And my final point, I said 2, but I'm going to lie and say 3, is that there is a wider set of applications and use cases starting to emerge now that we're seeing that enterprises in particular want to adopt, and they need simplicity in adoption.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and it makes a lot of sense of what you're saying now. For outside the hype in IoT and a lot of the challenges that we've been facing, all of us have been in the industry for quite some time. We've seen some of the ups and downs, but for folks that are getting into IoT services and solutions, or they're contemplating, what would be your advice to avoid some of the pitfalls, some of the challenges? And Jimmy, let me start with you this time around. What would be your advice for somebody entering into the market?
I think the first thing is you're going to need to collaborate, exactly as Andrew just mentioned, and Nick. There's a massive range of solutions now. So if, as a telco, if we just take it from the telco point of view, it used to be easy. There was only 3 solutions, basically. You rung your wife, you text your mum, or you surf the internet. So serving that market is easy, but there's hundreds of thousands of solutions now. So you have to be prepared to be actually flexible and work in a different way. So collaborating is key. And we're working with LoRaWAN companies, and we're trying to build in solutions for digital transformation, for instance, where you need to be talking to the guy about what his network is now, which will probably be Wi-Fi. It will be cabled to his servers. That, if you can provide security, is the one I'm thinking of at the moment. When we work with our security partner, they can be deployed on all of those, and you can ring fence the whole estate. Mm-hmm. And that's really important, because you can't have, you're only as strong as your weakest point, so you can't have an outlier LoRaWAN gateway, for instance, that's got a problem. You need to capture everything. And I think as a cellular company, if I can give that best advice, I know for a fact that LoRaWAN is good there, but I know when he goes into a van and drives things around, I know that cellular is probably going to be the better play. And as long as you're willing to accept that and give best advice and make the solution the winner, then I think you'll do well.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I think one of the pitfalls that we've been seeing is trying to make a sale. A lot of the architectures around IoT solutions have been shoehorned to fit somebody's solution without taking into consideration, hey, if I cannot make it, my partner can do it. So let's expand the view and the map a little bit, so we can get something that the customer can be successful with. So what about you, Nick? What would be your advice to somebody getting into the IoT or needing to deploy IoT solutions?
Well, we've got over 1,000 customers, and one of the interesting stats is that 80% of them came to us after a failed IoT project.
Yeah,
so we actually do try and measure the answer to your question. Yeah. Often the projects fail for complexity, and they fail for a variety of reasons. But the advice that we would, and frankly, they were sold something which doesn't exist. I mean, they thought it would be, whether it be, don't worry about roaming, we'll be fine, and then operators fall out with each other all the time. There was a big case 2 years ago when Verizon gave 3 hours notice that all non-US MVNOs had to leave the network. And it was a big issue for people like Jersey Telecom. You've got a medical device with a JT IMSI in it, and you've got 3 hours and it's embedded. It's a little tricky. But I think from the advice point of view, I would say start off with the business case. It's not a technology project. Maybe to bring it to life, use an example of one of the, I always like to try and understand the business case of customers. So which we did a podcast together, Nassia, and I talked about this, but a great example is Costa Coffee. We love them as a customer because they give us one of their machines so we can do the testing, so we get free coffee and work. But you might not know, the Costa Coffee machine is actually a business model disruption against Starbucks. If you think about it, Costa Coffee machine is not on a Costa premises. They don't pay for the square footage. It's in things like a BP garage. Yeah. They don't pay for the electricity. They don't pay for the beans. They don't pay for the milk. That's all part of the option. That's part of the fee that they give the garage. But what most people probably don't know is that when you buy a cup of coffee with Costa, there's 90 measurements are made. And a lot of them are about you. Because when it's what's called a two-device solution, they pop up on the screen, the big, huge, flat screens. Costa Express, this is. Scan your QR code to get your loyalty points. Well, actually, yes, you're getting loyalty points, but what they're getting is your identity.
Your data.
Then, therefore, they have long-tail personalization of every customer and every product, every option. It's a bit like, on the browser and propensity to buy metrics in marketing, but they actually know what you ordered, because we're creatures of habit. What you ordered, when you ordered it, where you ordered it, and so then can start marketing to you. And that was a great project because we were involved in the design of that machine. And we started with the experience, and the experience is I want personalized marketing, because when you walk into Starbucks, they ask you what your name is, and you write it on. They write it on a cup, and then what do? They shout your name out, latte for Nick, and then you pick the cup up and you walk out of Starbucks. At which point they don't know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
Now, if you pay by credit card, they don't have access to the credit card because that's the financial information. So actually, it's actually a disruptive model against Starbucks. So when they enter a new market, they can enter a new market in less than 24 hours because they just wheel machines in and switch them on. So they can go into Vietnam in 24 hours. And of course, Starbucks have to find a space, build a store, hire people, So I would say that the advice is start with the business case and work backwards, and then create the product to deliver the experience, and then look at the connectivity. So sort of in that order: business case, experience, and hardware-enabled experience, and then connectivity.
It's music to my ears, Nick, because I spent a lot of time there talking about business case before anything else. So it's good to hear.
Just one very quickly, excuse me. The problem is the people who are running the IoT projects tend to be the techies.
Technical.
And so if you say to them, what's the business case, they often don't know.
They don't have
so,
one.
Well, we actually qualify out. We qualify out. So if you don't know what the business case is, I'm not going to talk to you. Because it's going to fail.
Definitely. And one of the key things that I have seen and we've discussed before, Andrew, has been how much help and hand-holding. And part of what we're doing with business, a customer needs. What is your experience? What you've seen by talking to both the CSPs and other service providers?
No, I think, first of all, sort of answering part of your question before I move on to that. I mean, I totally agree with what Nick's just said. It's the business case, and one of the key drivers we see in enterprises using technology to create business advantage. That was probably the number one driver that came out of surveys. And the second one is improving the customer experience. So those are sort of key drivers, and I think it's important to communicate to those. And competitive pressures are also a sort of a key driver. The sort of barriers we're seeing is exactly the point you just made, Nassia, the lack of expertise, that companies want hand-holding. Now, when we surveyed, along with MEF, people who were already using IoT solutions, we saw very clearly that they were quite happy, they saw themselves as quite innovative, they were quite happy pushing these sort of solutions. But as we move into this newer market to adopt, we're seeing that they don't have the expertise, they don't have the technical understanding, and they simply don't know, and also that they tend to underestimate whether it's failed IoT projects, but how it impacts on their legacy processes and their legacy technologies. And another major growth barriers are that they're really concerned about security issues. They know that data is going to be flowing around different places from things they don't really understand, so that they do need a lot of hand-holding. And the key sort of how to help organisations in this sort of area, it is this hand-holding and helping through the design, the build, the implement process, providing technical support. And quite a lot of enterprises are saying, well, no, we also want the ability to change our suppliers. We don't want to be locked into someone. This is, particularly on the connectivity side. They want the ability to be able to strike new deals as new tariffs become more apparent. And then, starting off with a project, you don't often kind of realise what you need at the outset, and what your traffic's going to look like, what your spend's going to look like, and how you can put all these things together.
So, in the essence of time, and I want to allocate a little bit of time for questions, I have one question for all of you. If you can give me your 1 minute answer on what is the value of IoT? So, I'll start with you, Nick, on this one.
Thank you, Nassia. It's not technology. People, like Black & Decker say, you don't actually want to drill, you want a hole. So the value of IoT is to enable data-driven delivery of a better customer experience or a disruption of a business model. And we've seen digital disruption driven by interaction with people, on people's search history, and based on the algorithms, but based on what you're searching for something digitally, and therefore that has been massive business disruption in almost every industry. Lots of examples. We all know that. Well, now we're seeing digital disruption based on people's interaction with things, and there's going to be hundreds of billions of things that we interact with. So the simple answer is, if you thought phase one of what we saw with the internet and what you can do based on people's search history and electronically was radical, and lots of companies failed and new large companies grew. Imagine if you just take that same concept and apply it to people's interaction with things. And that's the value of, that's the promise. That's the promise of IoT, if you can do it.
That sounds good.
It's much harder, but that ultimately, I think, in 20 years' time is what we'll look back and say that's what it was.
We've been 20 years in the next 20 years, if we don't have a Beat Me Up Scotty and travel button, I will be highly disappointed. But outside that, Jimmy, what do you think is the value of IoT?
Well, exactly as Nick said, it depends on the use case. So it gives you the experience that personalised experience you now get online is going to be the personalised experience you have in life, which is in one way fantastic, and in the other way it's probably one of the scariest things I can think of, because to me the impact of IoT is going to be absolutely seismic, and we have to get it right. If you'd have asked people walking into social media 20 years ago what they thought, they wouldn't think it had the impact that it had. Nobody did. Well, I can't see IoT being any way less disruptive than that. I can see it being much, much more disruptive than that. And owning that information, Michael's in the room, is much better at this than me, but owning that, owning that data on every single device is going to be important. So just fundamentally, we need to say that every single device you own the data. So that's what we're trying to tell all of our customers, and I think it's really important that they take that on board, because at some point in time, all this regulation is going to think that, and it's just inevitable. You need to be ahead of the curve on that, and I think if you don't, you need to give your customers control, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to push as much security control to the edge, into devices and into the SIM with us. But that control is hugely important, because if we do get it wrong, we can't afford to get this wrong, because you can turn off your social media. Nobody does, but you can. You can't turn off your house, you can't turn off your car, you can't turn off the street you're walking down. So it's hugely important.
Yeah. Andrew, 1 minute, please, on the value of IoT. I know it's...
I'll repeat the same thing. It's creating business advantage. Businesses want more revenues, they want more business, and they want better customer experiences. So IoT, in terms of the value of IoT, is bringing all those aspects together. And I think we might be at a transition point now where IoT may well be the wrong name for what we're doing, and that it needs to be called something else. It's been good in the growth phase.
I think so.
Does it soon become yet another enterprise application that we see it as part of a portfolio approach to a customer?
I think part of the confusion of IoT is the term IoT, because it's the connotations around it and the hype around it has been going around for a while. I think we need to change the narrative in many ways of how we do things and what we say, and put it into the right bucket. So because there's IoT and there is IoT, so then, and what it means IoT to one person is very different to what it means to another person. So I would have loved to have time to get into business models and how to make money with IoT, but unfortunately, we just have enough time for one question. So anybody in the audience? Oh, you know how to operate? Yes, thank you.
So at the end of the day, for everyone, as people, as consumers, will IoT mean that we spend more time or less time staring at our screens on our phones?
What would you like to take?
I think it'd be less time, because everything will become a screen. Everything that you interact with will get to that level of interaction. In 10 years' time, I'm going to say 6G now, it's going to kill. But when 6G turns up and you get those speeds, then what you can do is you get rid of the need for the device to do anything, and you can just connect that uplink to anything really powerful. So essentially, when your kids are, I don't know how your kids are, but in 15 years' time, you'll be using a screen, and that will be just a window, or it'll be a surface, or it'll be a table. So everything will become a screen. So we're physically entering the metaverse.
Augmented reality in real time without needing to wear goggles. So everything will be connected, and you can, transmit objects. And you heard about Neuralink, right? Elon Musk wants to connect our brains to everything. So it's
The Matrix is what you're describing.
Sorry?
Matrix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Different version, but.
Or maybe I'll pick up on the theme of the metaverse. If you think about it. I'll go back to the first wave of the internet. We monetized human behavior, search. It was only one parameter, essentially, search. But then the world's radically changed. But in the metaverse, we can now make the number of parameters 3, because the first thing is that, especially with whether it's headsets or glasses, you can actually monetize what you look at, because in the metaverse you look at things.
Yeah.
So if I look at you and I hesitate a bit longer than if I look at Jimmy,
I can charge you.
Jimmy, but the algorithm picks up there's interest. So you can monetize your eyes. And the second thing you can monetize is, let's say I walk down a street and there's a cafe, and you're sitting at the cafe and we talk to each other. In the metaverse, you might be an advert. So you can talk to adverts, because companies will create avatars that are adverts. Mm-hmm. And I actually think this is the reason that Zuckerberg is pumping billions and billions into something that people don't understand, because actually he's found 2 more parameters of monetization. And so will we spend more time looking at our screens? No, but I don't think we will understand as much as what we're looking at, because we will be looking at things that are created specifically for us based on our behavior.
And with that, we run a little bit over.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
It's all right.
Next up, we'll be talking. We have more about IoT and 5G, so you can ask more questions of what is happening at that time. So I would really like to thank you, gentlemen, Andrew, Nick, and Jimmy. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for your insight. I wish we had more time to dive even deeper, but there's always a next time, right?
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks,